Good afternoon. This is Lee Price, and we'll be beginning the webinar very soon. I'm just waiting to see if we get a few more registrants in the room here with us. We have 45 people last signed up for the webinar today, and at the moment we have 11 people online, so we could easily see the numbers go up fairly fast, especially since the webinar that the email that went out yesterday said that the room wouldn't be opening for people to come to the webinar until exactly 2 o'clock. And so we'll just give everybody a couple of more minutes to see if they show up. Now, if people aren't attending, they will be able to get a recording of the webinar. In fact, I think that's going out to everybody. So and if anybody does have to leave the webinar early today, no worries, you will be able to access a full recording of the whole webinar session today. I do want to check on, this is the first time I'm using this new webinar software that we're using, Webinar Jam, and so I hope everything goes very smoothly, and I do want to make absolutely sure that everybody can hear me adequately. If you can, please type a message, and let's see how the chat system works here as well. Just type in yes, or if there's a problem. Obviously, if you can't hear me, you won't be responding, but it would be very nice to be hearing that people are hearing. As I said before, we'll just wait a couple of more minutes to see to see how many more people will be attending today. Okay then, so let's get started with the webinar because I do have a lot of material to be covering today. Good afternoon, welcome to the first of 4 webinars that we're doing. This is Introduction to Building Capacity HBCU, as it says on the slide. This is a project that I've been honored to be assisting with, working closely with Sandra Phoenix, the Executive Director of the HBCU Library Alliance. Assisting her with program development and fundraising on this project since the winter of 2017. So it's been a year and a half to date that Sandra and I have been working on this. As I mentioned before, a few minutes ago, as everybody was entering the room, my name is Lee Price. I'm the Director of Development at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. If I sound familiar to a few of you, there's a possibility we may have met at last year's HBCU Library Alliance membership meeting, where I co-led a pre-conference fundraising workshop with Debbie Hess-Norris, the HBCU Library Alliance board member and chief photography conservation guru with the University of Delaware Winter Tour program. I'm happy to share that since that time and the intervening months since that meeting, we've received significant support for building capacity HBCU from 2 funders. The National Endowment for the Humanities and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and their support is sufficient for us to now officially launch building capacity. We're starting with an old school low tech table of contents to just give you some idea of the structure we'll be following as we move through this hour. starting with some general introductions to our new program, sort of the big picture, what the goals are going to be, some of the ground rules, the timetable. Then we'll be looking at what to expect with the application form. So this is important so that you can start dreaming about how you can best take advantage of the various services and activities that we're offering. And then finally, some tips for both how to be competitive in getting the most you can from this project. There will be time at the end for questions and comments, but if you have any questions that you want to ask as the webinar is going along, just please feel free to use the chat box. You can enter your comment there on the side of the screen. Sometimes I'm a little slow in on the uptake on realizing there's a comment there, but I will I'll do my best. We'll get back to your question. If I don't get to it, we'll get back to it as soon as possible. The other alternative is if you have questions and you don't have to immediately share them, or you're just deciding to wait till the end, that's fine as well. Just wait to the questions and comments at the end, and by that time you might have covered everything that you were wondering about anyway, or we can tackle some questions then. I should acknowledge that the story of building capacity really begins all the way back in 2007 when the HBCU Library Alliance embarked on a whole series of very ambitious multi-year photograph preservation programs, all funded through the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and bringing the HBCU Library Alliance into some very strong partnerships with the Winterthur University of Delaware Program in Art Conservation, with Cornell University Library, with Lyrasis, with the Image Permanence Institute, and with the organization that I'm with, the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. But these programs were all tightly focused on the photography collections at the member libraries, while our new program, Building Capacity, while it builds on these, is considerably expanding the scope, we think, in some very exciting ways. Building Capacity, HBCU, is shorthand for the full title, Building Capacity for Humanities Special Collections at Historically Black Colleges and Universities. So it's important first for you to understand the key program limitation that's built into the official project title. From this point, we're not talking about your whole library, but rather we're focusing on the special collections or the archival section of your library. And as our primary funder is the National Endowment for the Humanities, it's natural that the emphasis falls on the humanities importance of your special collections, specifically how your collections can help interpret regional history and culture, national history, and even world history. We're hoping that this 5-year project will provide opportunities for you to learn more about your own collections through this intense focus, and to really embrace some opportunities to share your resources with the world, and using this as an opportunity to show how your collections, through increased accessibility, can illuminate our perspectives on regional, national, and world history and culture. That's the kind of extra bonus benefit that you can get from this type of really intensive approach. Our huge overarching goal is to build capacity for the long-term preservation and conservation of collections at the 71 member libraries of the HBCU Library Alliance. But, and this is our first reality check, This is a competitive program the way that we've set it up. Some libraries out of the 71 will benefit more than others. This isn't a level playing field. But while it's not a level playing field, there is going to be an ongoing effort throughout the program to involve as many libraries as humanly possible. I'll be discussing this a little later in the webinar with some tips on how to best position yourself in your applications in order to be competitive. My hope is that this program will ultimately directly benefit more than half of the 71 libraries. And since there are 44 libraries represented as webinar attendees today, that's now my new goal. Let's say that I'm hoping everyone here today, all 44 libraries, will realize some genuine benefits over the next 5 years, incrementally improving their special collections. That's my personal goal and hope. You can't win if you don't play, and by your attendance today, well, you're already in the game. So I mentioned that it was a 5-year program, and the clock is ticking now with the formal approval of the Mellon Grant in April, followed by the formal government grant agreement with NEH just this past month. So at this point, we're off and running at last. Over the next 5 years, we will be offering 4 rounds of grant funds. Each library can apply in each of these 4 rounds for projects that will document cultural heritage materials, increase the accessibility of special collections items, and promote the humanities significance of the rare and irreplaceable materials in your collections. We're talking about books and manuscripts, but also special collections that may include artwork, objects, textiles, and audiovisual material as well. We'll offer opportunities to request funding for receiving planning documents, for conservation treatment or rehousing projects, as well as reformatting projects, and for education or training programs. This is an opportunity to treat your special collections right, to show them some love, and to share them with the world. When we use the words building capacity, we actually mean them pretty seriously. I know this program mainly appears to be about specific preservation projects at your libraries, getting them done and done well, and that's a great deal of what will be accomplished. But our funders, NEH and Mellon, are also hoping to see some real capacity building coming out of this right alongside the projects. So they want to see growth in fundraising expertise and creativity as well. And they want to see the promotion of what you've got. They're hoping that these grant opportunities will be a good leverage to open new doors for you. And that's why in our 3rd round of funding, not our 1st or 2nd, this doesn't start until the 3rd round, there will be a 1-to-1 matching component. I'll get to more about this later, but matching challenges are a proven effective tool for capacity building. And one other component they really hope to see, they want to see increases in your promotion of your archival collections. They want to view this as an opportunity for you to aggressively share what you've got. So we're in summer now. This fall, you will be receiving a building capacity application form to apply for up to $30,000 in grant funds for a project or projects. You can a mix of projects in one application is fine, and you can apply for grant funds for projects from the following menu. will be the menu of services here includes preservation planning documents. We'll be going over them, collection or item level surveys, treatment and/or rehousing projects, and education programs. These are the things that you can apply for through these 4 rounds. I'll be going through them one at a time. First category, there are 4 preservation planning documents that you can apply for. First, there's the preservation needs assessment. Now, these are the essential documents for preservation planning. So if you have one already, that's great. You may have received, like, say, a CAP survey. That's exactly what we're talking about. A CAP survey is a preservation needs assessment. A CAP being a collections assessment for preservation survey, that's an IMLS funding category. Or some states offer similar surveys to this as well. In my immediate neighborhood, New Jersey and New York both have programs that offer preservation needs assessments or the equivalent, archival needs assessments in some cases. And that falls exactly under this category too, but not all states do. In my immediate neighborhood, also Pennsylvania here, where the Conservation Center is located, Pennsylvania doesn't currently have a program offering preservation needs assessment. So some states do, some states don't. My point is that you may have one already, and then the next question is your preservation needs assessment up to date? So to be considered up to date, these assessments have a shelf life of about 10 years. So if you received an assessment 7 years ago and you haven't undergone any significant managerial or environmental changes since then in our opinion, in general opinion, you have an up-to-date needs assessment, and at this point you wouldn't really need another. But if you don't have that survey yet, or if it's no longer up to date, if it's 15 years old now, you can apply here for a preservation needs assessment, which is, a preservation needs assessment is where an outside preservation specialist comes to your library for a 1-day site visit and then develops a full report evaluating policies, practices, and conditions being things like temperature, humidity, light levels in the collection storage and the exhibition areas. All this with recommendations for future improvements to consider. The price tag for this, you can request on your application form $6,000, which is the fixed price for a preservation needs assessment from the Conservation Center, or you can request the service through another appropriate preservation professional of your choice, whatever they're charging. The second of the planning documents now that we're offering through building capacity is a long-term preservation plan, which is a document that takes the recommendations of the preservation needs assessment and works them into a strategic plan to get everything accomplished. All the recommendations of the needs assessment get put into the long-term preservation plan, and like a strategic plan, it provides a timetable and assigns tasks, making it a real working tool that you can use to reach your goals over a set period of time. And it's also an ideal document for folding into your larger library strategic plan, an appendix to the larger plan, with the price tag for that being through the Conservation Center, a fixed price of $6,000, or through another appropriate preservation professional of your choice, whatever they're charging. The third planning document, collections management policies, which are the written and approved policies that define an overall legal framework for your work, both assigning responsibilities and setting standards. Typical policies would include policies on acquisition, deaccessioning, documentation, loaning policies, access, and just saying deaccessioning, you really shouldn't attempt to deaccession material in a special collection without the policy that legally explains how the deaccessioning process functions. So these can be very important legal documents. A handling and use policy, care and maintenance, and a care and maintenance policy would cover conservation, storage, environment, inventory, an exhibition policy, a housekeeping policy, a security policy, and an integrated pest management program. So you can work with a consultant to either develop first-time policies, or if you have old ones that really need looking at, to upgrade your current ones. Price tag on that. Through the Conservation Center, a fixed price of $6,000, or through another appropriate museum or archival consultant of your choice, whatever they would be charging for this. And the fourth planning document, an emergency response and mitigation plan that addresses collections. To safeguard your collections, you should have an emergency plan ever available, both on and off-site. These plans identify vulnerabilities and risks to the collection, recommend mitigation strategies, outline response tasks, and maintain a list of who to call when an emergency occurs, so you don't go blank, deer in headlights style, at a time when every second counts. And the price tag for this, through the Conservation Center for a fixed price of $12,000, or through another appropriate preservation professional of your choice, whatever they would be charging. And so that's our first broad category of preservation planning documents. Moving on to the next category here now. This is surveys and condition reports. This is really the first step in a two-step process for leading into conservation treatment or audiovisual reformatting projects. As part of applying for treatment, you'll need condition reports, treatment plans, and cost estimates first for the items that you're targeting. This category covers the collection level survey or the item by item survey that you'll need in order to move on to step 2, the treatment request. If you already have a survey or a treatment plan prepared by an outside conservator, that would take care of step 1, and you can move right to step 2 for treatment and apply for treatment. But if you don't have a survey yet, if the collection you're looking at hasn't been surveyed, if a conservator has not closely examined the collection items, well, this is one good avenue for you to get that. Identify the conservator that you'd like to work with. We're happy to help you here at the Conservation Center, or you can always go to the American Institute for Conservation, that's AIC. AIC has a Find a Conservator tool, which is easy to use and very helpful. Looks at where you're located and the type of material, the type of conservator that you would that you'll need to be treating your materials. So you can go there for AIC Find a Conservator, or once again, you can just call us, contact us here at the Conservation Center, and then work out with the conservator an appropriate scope for the collection survey and the total cost that they'll be charging for the work. This isn't one of those fixed price things. It all depends on a number of factors. So there are two types of these surveys. There's the collection level survey, which is a broad-based approach that looks at the larger collections and usually employs random sampling to provide guidance on the extent of needed treatment work and and what the cost estimates are. You can go for a collection level survey through building capacity, but in most cases, it's probably the item specific survey that's going to be more appropriate, where the conservator is examining a smaller collection or sub-collection, or even just targeted highlight items, and for those items providing condition reports, treatment plans, and cost estimates for each one. There are several types of conservators, and you'll need to work with the appropriate conservator for the type of artifacts that you want examined. Most are self-explanatory. For these grants, you can work with paper conservators, book conservators, photograph conservators. Those are the three types of conservators that we have here at the Conservation Center: book, paper, and photo. Painting conservators, which means painting on canvas or murals, as opposed to works of art on paper, which are generally treated by paper conservators. And there are textile conservators. Object conservators, that's a very broad field, and you should check first to make sure that your object is appropriate to your for your chosen object conservator. And AV or media archivists, to look at your audiovisual collections. That's film, video, your oral history recordings. There's no set price for these, as the prices will be so dependent upon the type of material and the number of items involved. And so it's all worked out in conversation with the conservator in advance when you're preparing your application. And next would be step 2 in that process. Our next broad category is treatment or rehousing, actually requesting funding for treatment of artifacts or reformatting of AV material based on the proposals and the cost estimates that you've received from those surveys. Or the implementation of a rehousing project, which might be done on site at your library, maybe you can do them with your interns, and you could apply for a day of on-site training for staff and volunteers involved in the project. You can include housing supplies in your housing request, and even within some limits, purchase of storage furniture. And the last category for funding from our menu of services is our menu of programs for education programs, which you can apply for and then host at your institution. The Conservation Center is offering a menu of available full-day education programs, each of which can be customized to meet your specific needs. For these, the programs would be aimed for audiences of 15 to 25 people. Primary audience would be appropriate staff, interns, volunteers at your library. However, if the number of people attending from your library is less than 15, we are requesting that you open the class to other organizations, in inviting other HBCUs that may be in traveling distance in your region, as well as any other relevant organizations, museums, historical societies, libraries, archives, other organizations that you think might benefit from the program. These programs, the ones offered by the Conservation Center, are available, the ones that, the ones that we're offering are available for a set fixed price of $5,000, which includes everything. But you aren't limited to these programs. You may, of course, reach out to other organizations to provide in-house education or training programs on relevant preservation topics as well. Or you can reach out to us to offer a program that's not listed if you'd like us to see if we can pull something together that's more appropriate for your particular preservation needs. Just as a side note, I would like to acknowledge now something that is missing from this menu. There's no digitization category. We completely realize that digitization is an extremely valuable need and service, but we just couldn't fit it into the parameters of the funding guidelines this time. But we would strongly encourage for you to look at these projects as naturally leading toward and supporting digitization projects. If you are interested in learning more about how to leverage for digitization, especially from some of the projects here, there will be opportunities all along the road for no-cost fundraising consultation through building capacity, mainly through me. Well, I think I'm the only one offering to do this for free. So mainly through me. So if you'd like consultation on raising funds for a digitization project, we'll do everything that we can to help with that, because we do like to see those projects move forward. We like maximum accessibility. The application form. This is how you apply for your grants in each round. But please note that what I have on the screen right now, this is just the sample draft form. We're still working on the actual application form. It's not done yet, and anticipate disseminating it probably in early fall. Probably late September, most likely. On your part, when you get it, the application form will require some thought and a little work. The purpose of the application is to provide the building capacity advisory committee with enough information for them to make informed and fair decisions about how to distribute funding in each round. So the application form will include questions about both your proposed project or projects and about the humanities significance of your collection. We'll be trying to solicit information through open-ended questions. In your responses, please share about the historical significance of both your entire special collection and especially the items that will be directly impacted by the projects. Also, any history of preservation work that you've done today. This shows real commitment on your part and is always impressive. If you've ever had an assessment before, or worked with a conservator, or if you've maintain an environmental monitoring program, if you've developed any finding aids, if you've done any digitization, items like this show a commitment to preservation, and it would be very helpful to your case to share about them in your application. We'll want to know about the preservation challenges and concerns that you're most eager to tackle, where you feel your need is most strong and compelling, and your hopes for how your long-term plans will ultimately lead to making your collections more accessible. Submitted budgets for each round can be for up to $30,000. But be aware that the advisory committee will have authority to partially fund a request, providing full funding only for the project or projects that they approve. So each project would be fully funded, but if you go for four projects, you might only get funded for one or two of them and not all four. So say you might apply for $24,000 for a preservation needs assessment, collections management policies, and an emergency plan, totaling $24,000, only to have the advisory committee recommend funding for only one of those projects, $12,000 to get the emergency plan. I'm actually hoping that this will be how the advisory committee proceeds, because in a single round, I'd be happier to see 20 libraries get $6,000 grants each, rather than just 4 libraries receive $30,000 each. a case of spreading the love more equitably. In reality, I'm sure the giving will be somewhere between these two poles, between $6,000 for 20 or 4 for 30. It'll be somewhere in between those two poles. But I'm personally hoping that lots of libraries will receive some project funding through these grants rather than a few libraries dominating. But I will stress that there's really no downside in applying for more than one project. Maybe you will get them all, so why not try? Or maybe just one, or there's always the chance, well, there is always the chance that you won't get any, and you'll need to reapply in the next round. And if that happens, just, my general fundraising advice always, please don't get discouraged. That's just the way that fundraising works. You can call us, you can talk to us, and you can reapply. I see so many organizations get their applications approved on their second or third try in grant programs. The advisory committee will be encouraged to consider the applications with the following collection stewardship flowchart in mind. This is a flowchart depicting an admittedly idealistic process for thoughtfully and incrementally addressing preservation issues. As we are recommending that the advisory committee review proposals in the context of this chart, they have it basically in front of them when they're reviewing the proposals. It's going to be an important chart for you to be familiar with also, to organize your thinking about how to most benefit from building capacity. Consider, where does your special collection stand right now on this chart? Are items fully inventoried? Do you have an emergency plan that addresses the special collections? And on down. Then, based on your answers to this self-assessment, what project funding should you apply for to successfully move your library down the flow chart? Because that's progress here, moving it incrementally down. Looking at it from the top down, starting with inventory, I just want to make it clear, we're not funding inventory. That's just something that you should be doing. It's part of the normal business of having a special collection. So please keep on top of inventory, but also at the top is emergency planning, and that we are funding. If you don't have an emergency preparedness and response plan, this is where you should start. Underneath that is assessment. In this category are those preservation needs assessments that I was pushing before. Note that we have a very nice combination starter application that might be for emergency planning and the preservation needs assessment together. You can do both of them in a single year easily. Or say you could do emergency planning in year 1 and then apply for a preservation needs assessment in your year 2 application. Either approach works fine, but do note that you have to pass through the assessment to get to everything below it. At least that is if you're following the recommended process. Requests for a long-term preservation plan can be looked at sort of as assessment part 2, or you could, if you like, you could apply for the preservation plan at the same time that you apply for the preservation needs assessment. They can be prepared one right after the other, easily getting it done in a single year. Needs assessment first and preservation plan directly following. Note that the preservation plan is extremely helpful. This is the preservation plan. The long-term preservation plan is extremely helpful. However, it's not as critical a piece of the planning process as that preservation needs assessment. You can work your way down the chart without the preservation plan. We think that it's extraordinarily useful, the preservation plan, and we do encourage you getting one, but not really necessary for proceeding. Over to the left, we have the management category on the flow chart. We've stuffed a lot into this category. It covers development or upgrading of a full set of collection management policies. It covers all types of cataloging and the development of finding aids. And it also is generally used as a catch-all for the rehousing projects that institutions do. These are all great potential projects, but for our purposes here, we don't fund cataloging and development of finding aids. That's not being included in this project. But we are funding collections management policies and rehousing projects. And with the rehousing projects, that would be funding for training, rehousing materials and supplies within limits, possibly storage furniture as well. Your preservation needs assessment may recommend improvements in the environment category, such as environmental monitoring or purchase of storage furniture, or even big ticket recommendations like an upgraded HVAC system. If you receive recommendations like this, we can offer some no-cost fundraising consultation because there are places you can go, sometimes even to get the project or purchase fully funded. But building capacity, HBCU, won't be covering the environment funding categories. We can just point you in the direction of some other good funders. But please don't get hung up here in this category in the environment, because unlike assessment, where we're fairly insistent on you having an up-to-date assessment, you can move down to the next step, surveys, without necessarily accomplishing anything in the environment category. Surveys underneath environment, surveys refer to the collection level surveys and item by item surveys that I mentioned before, led by a professional conservator. And of course, you can apply for these. Then once you have the treatment plans and cost estimates in hand, you can move down to the last item on the chart, treatment or AV reformatting, and you can apply for that. Will there be exceptions to the chart? Sure. Or at least very probably, yes, there will be. The system, it's just the way things work in this field. There's got to be flexibility. If you have a collection that's in emergency need of treatment or a housing project, you can make the argument that it is by far your most urgent need, and that might very well fly. Following the flow chart is not a strict requirement. There are no ironclad rules here. However, I am recommending that if you decide to significantly deviate from a process similar to this, you should have a very good idea of why you are deviating from it, why this is such an emergency compelling need that you should go right down to treatment or rehousing or AV reformatting, why that is your most urgent need at this point. You'd have to make a very, very clear argument for that on why this is the particular project that you've settled on, why it should take precedence over everything else. Now back to our schedule. There will be 4 rounds of funding, beginning with application this fall for projects in 2020 and finishing with our 4th and last round of funding for projects in 2023. Please note again that the first 2 rounds of funding will not require matching funds. If your project or projects are funded in these first 2 rounds, they'll be completely funded. And then things do change with that third round in 2022. With those final two rounds, a one-to-one match will be required. So if you want to do say a $12,000 treatment project in the third round, you would ask for $6,000, and then you would be required to contribute to raise another $6,000 in non-federal matching funds to complete the project. We understand that this makes the last two rounds much more challenging than the first two, but that's also part of what building capacity, the name of the project, is all about. Building new resources so you can accomplish more. It's always the case in fundraising that it's easier to raise money when you have money. And in this case, you will have the initial funding to serve as leverage as you work to raise the match. Please always feel free to be in touch with me or Sandra if you want to brainstorm about ideas for raising the match. Fundraising advice and consultation for these projects is just an ongoing free perk of building capacity. So start thinking now about what you'd like to be accomplishing between now and the end of 2023. Be thinking about this whole span, about all four rounds. Realistically assess your current situation, note where you stand on the flow chart, and develop a flexible strategy for working your way down the flow chart. At the next membership meetings of the HBCU Library Alliance in 2020 and 2022, there will be opportunities to discuss, brainstorm, and plan for opportunities to leverage your building capacity grants. At both these membership meetings, I'll be offering free one-on-one fundraising clinics, which will only require signing up in advance. And there we can discuss your unique ideas, your unique needs, and we can brainstorm ideas. Multi-year planning. Here are just some hypothetical strategies for thinking about how to be approaching these four rounds over the next 5 years. So for the first year, you could apply for emergency planning and a preservation needs assessment. Second year, apply for a long-term preservation plan. Third year, apply for a collection survey. And that time, a match is required for that particular grant. Then you move on to the fourth year and apply for treatment based on the collection survey, once again with the match required. Or another strategy, you start this project with an emergency plan and an up-to-date preservation needs assessment already in place. You've already got those documents, you don't need new ones, so you can launch right into the thick of things. In year one, you can apply for collections management development policies, maybe upgrading old ones that you have, and a collection and getting a first-time collection survey of a particular part of your collection that you would really like to make more accessible. Second year, there's a lot of recommended treatment from the collection survey, so you apply for a portion of it. It doesn't quite go the whole way, so you do some of it second year, and then in the third year, you just apply for the rest of it, and this time there is the requirement for the match. And then finally, in the fourth year, going for a rehousing project for housing training and housing materials and supplies to get you started on an in-house rehousing project. These are just a couple of very hypothetical ideas on how you can be looking long-term on how to be using these programs. There are just dozens, and this doesn't even This doesn't even address the possibility of including some training programs in there and building on some of the education programs that were listed earlier and how you can work on building with them. So there are just dozens of other mix and match variations that you can use in setting yourself up for strong applications for funding. We have 3 more webinars coming up very soon to help you think and plan about building capacity opportunities. The next webinar, Collections Care Basics, is scheduled for Wednesday, August 14th at 10 a.m. and it will provide an overview of the collections care concerns that the advisory committee will consider when they're looking at the applications for the grants in each of the rounds. This webinar will provide an introduction to collections care basics through the 10 agents of deterioration, physical force, theft and vandalism, fire, water, pest, pollutants, light, incorrect temperature, incorrect relative humidity, and custodial neglect, all things that are very much dealt with in the preservation needs assessment process. After that, on Tuesday, August 27th at 10 a.m., Know Your Collections, Collections Management will cover key collections management topics such as acquisition, appraisal, documentation and deeds of gift, inventory, and deaccessioning. So that's very much about the collections management policy and the importance of having good, up-to-date collections management policies that have been formally approved. And finally, on Thursday, September 12th at 10 a.m., Building Momentum, Promoting Your Collections will suggest strategies for capitalizing on your grants for both promotional and fundraising purposes. So that's what I have today. If there are, I've been looking to see if there have been questions as we've been going along, questions or comments. So I'm opening the floor now. If anybody would like to type any questions in over on the chat or the comment areas, I'll do my best to address them. And I believe that Sandra doesn't have access to this, but she can be back in touch with you too if it's a question that's more appropriate for her to be addressing. We'll just wait a few minutes here to see if there's any indication of anybody typing or if there are any questions out here. We do, like I said, the application forms we hope to be distributing by the end of September. And then you will have some time, we'll be having. Thank you. I saw we have a question from Woodruff Library. Thank you. I saw third round applications in 2021 and 2022. Is that correct? Actually, I have to go back and look. I gotta look. Let me see. First application round is 19, going into 20 for the implementation. And then the second application round in the application year. Third application round begins in fall 2021 with the applications, and then it's I repeated third application twice. I messed up on the on the chart I had there. It should be in 2022. That would be the fourth application. What? Let me get this straight again. 19 to 20 is the first. 20 to 21 is the second, 21 to 22 is the third, and 22 to 23 is the fourth. I hope I have this right. I know it's 4 rounds, and it's 1 round per year. So looking at the chart, I'm getting confused here, but but basically you're looking at four rounds, 4 years of projects. I may have messed it up a little bit on the chart here. I should clean that up. Yeah, I have 2 years, 2023. That's where I messed up. I just had 2023 on the chart twice. I think that was my problem. Any other questions before we go along? And if there are general questions about the whole program, um, questions about the whole program can certainly be raised at the following webinars. As you think more about this and you're wondering if something would be appropriate or not, it's always appropriate to raise that as a question during the webinar. And also, I mean, Sandra and I can field questions by email as well. Always happy to do that. My email's on this last slide right there, so you can be in touch anytime with me. And I'm sure everybody here has Sandra's, has access to Sandra as well. If that's it, I guess we'll be closing it up, and I just want to thank everybody for attending today, and I do really want to encourage everybody to be participating in this as we move forward with and you receive your application forms. Dream big. We have a question from Angela. Is it possible to have the webinar emailed to us? Yes, it will be. I think we're hoping to have it mailed out by the end of the week, and we'll be mailing it to everybody who signed up as a participant. And Leah's not in the room with me, but she's monitoring this. She can put it in the chat column here if I'm getting this wrong, but I do believe we're just automatically emailing the webinar to everybody, including everybody who's been here today. So all the 45 people who signed up for the webinar get a copy of it. Any other questions? Once again, this is, speaking as a fundraising professional, I just very much believe in taking full advantage of any opportunity to go after funding for projects, and therefore, I would say, take this quite seriously and be be thinking about how you can best really use this to make an impact on your collections. Question from Woodruff Library: is it AV treatment rather than reformatting? It's either one. If you have an AV or media archivist come in to look at AV materials in your collections, there's some material that it's most likely that for primarily accessibility purposes, but really reformatting in a number of formats is recommended over treatment. But there are some exceptions to that where the AV material should be treated. So it basically it comes off of whatever is being recommended by the expert, and either one, treatment or reformatting, would be a possibility. Probably not too much treatment, because we're in the field of AV where treatment is most likely to be the recommendation is for treatment of film. And treatment of film is quite expensive, so it could easily sort of swamp that maximum of 30,000 that you're allowed to go for. So chances are most of the AV projects that would be funded through something like this would be formatting for reformatting rather than treatment. but nevertheless, you get it from the expert and you find out how much it costs, and you can see if you can make a decent project scope out of it. Angela asks, is it possible to have a treatment plan along with rehousing for images on transparencies? Yeah, absolutely. For images on transparencies, I'm not sure if that falls. I would have to check with our photo conservator to see if that's falling. I know we work on slides regularly, and I think that would be the type of thing that would be worked on there. Very frequently in those situations, it is primarily the recommended procedure is primarily for rehousing rather than treatment. But sometimes treatment is involved. Yeah, you just have the conservator take a look at the transparencies and make recommendations on that. For rehousing, I'm not entirely clear in what I presented here on whether you should have that collection survey recommending housing going in. Sometimes the needs assessment survey, the preservation needs assessment, will just say you should get a collection rehoused, and then it's just a question of talking with a conservator to recommend appropriate housing supplies that you should be purchasing for the collection, and then you can put in the housing supplies with that. I do like to include training on any rehousing projects, especially since usually housing projects are done by people who don't have that much experience with housing these particular materials in the past. And also, housing projects are a good opportunity to be pulling out material that may need conservation treatment for a conservator to look at a later time, and therefore through training, the interns or whatever, or the staff who are going through the material can be shown in the training how to identify material that should be put aside for further examination. So we like to include that too. Let me see where I am on the questions here. Can AV reformatting be digitization? Would that be eligible for this project? Almost. We put in the application that reformatting is part of reformatting was in the NEH application as being something eligible for funding, and reformatting is almost necessarily digital. So in this case, I do believe that digitization is acceptable for reformatting. I think in our guidelines for the application form, we should make it quite clear on whether or not it is eligible. But at this point, I'm going to say that yes, digital reformatting, that's basically how reformatting is done these days. It is a digital process. So I believe, yes, I think it would. I think that's the exception to digitization not being one of the projects here. Is there any funding for printing of the images which are on transparency? That's a type of question that, that's getting down into the nuts and bolts of things. I'd say that's a good conversation for me directly on the phone with an individual because it seems pretty unique to the organization. But I would say that that's a type of thing that you could easily put within a housing project, and then, yeah, it would cover that. I don't see any problem with that at all. So this has been fun going through the questions. There's some fantastic questions at the end here. And any further questions, like I said, please bring them to the next webinar that we'll be having. Or just be in touch with me directly through my email or with Sandra through Sandra's email. And this has been Delight. I'm looking very forward to the project. Thank you.